All right, young people, we are coming back with another video, but we are going to discuss the Detroit Pistons, and I, at the end of it, I'm going to talk about my top five. Uh, oh no, I'm going to talk. No, not top five. I'm going to talk about like how Shaquille O'Neal does not make my top five centers of all time, and the reason why I'm going to bring this up because there's actually uh, a guy that the Pistons drafted that put me in the mind of a guy that most would not put in a top five centers, particularly of all times. And the guy, I'm about to say the Lions, that the Pistons drafted was Isaiah Stewart. And it's interesting because I'm going to compare him to a guy that is often forgotten when it's mentioned in in the NBA and all that good stuff of great players and so forth, and as well as I'm going to talk about like the continuation of the blueprint of like how they're restructuring this team and the image of the two champions with the bad boys and going to work crew. All right, if I'm Troy Weaver and I have two structures that I can mimic and I can take from of winning and like in this in basketball and as a local team such as the Pistons, like we just said, you got the bad boys and you got the going to work crew. You have two. I'm gonna say Hall of Fame. Yeah. I can say that. You actually have two Hall of Fame coaches that got that won Detroit, that won the Pistons two titles. Chuck Daly and Larry Brown. Each one of them was very good in their own right. Uh, to be in the Hall of Fame as coaches, as well as winning them titles, particularly here. So, if you were to have a blueprint of about as coaching, he can take something from there. But it fast forward over to the players. If I were to, excuse me, if I were to build a team here, it would be in the image of two players. It would be the image of Isaiah Thomas and Ben Wallace. Why those two? And why those two? Because they both and they both showed, and they both era, and they both stints here, in both of their stints, that they both started from really nothing. They may came from two different perspectives of talent and drafting and so forth. I believe Ben Wallace went undrafted and Isaiah went number two. So, with that being said, if I'm going to start my team, I'm going to start with both of those two guys because they both were just like tough, mentally tough. Like, you're not going to outwill them type guys. Now, Ben Wallace may not have been the most athletic, whatever, and all that good stuff. He had his limitations, but yet and still, you wouldn't know it because it wasn't just like he was good at rebounding. You wasn't going to outwork him. So I can, for the lack of what they would call skills or, the ability to jump out the rim or the ability to shoot the ball or the ability to make free throws, I can win with will. The desire to even to will. Just like this is what made Dennis Rodman so good. They would say Dennis Rodman is a good athlete, but Dennis Rodman had a will. Like you wasn't gonna outwork him. So I I said I want to look at Isaiah Stewart in that exact same mode. But with that being said, if you look at the guys that they brought in I would say this year's draft and free agency of the 2020 offseason, they brought in guys that has a motor, a willpower motor. It's not what the previous ones before that the guys that was having had talent, but I didn't see the motor. Like the Pistons going to work, I mean, where the bad boys going to work motor. So in the front court, my blueprint is Ben Wallace. In the back court, my front court, in the back court, my blueprint is Isaiah Thomas. So I don't know how. I was having a discussion with my brother about the whole all season and all this. What I'm saying it was coming out, and I was telling him about it. He said that's a good. He said, well, not good. He said that's an interesting take. A lot of things that I said, he didn't see it. And we got on the subject of Killian Hayes and so forth, and then I was telling him about Derrick Rose and how my stance is like Derrick Rose is a combination of Isaiah Thomas. At this point of his career, Derrick Rose is a combination of Isaiah Thomas and Chauncey Billups. So Isaiah Thomas, because he been to the mountaintop, he was a number one draft pick, and he got the accolades, the personal accolades, and so forth. And he was one of the elites in this time in his era, post injury and all that good stuff. And so he has that I would say that resume that Isaiah Thomas had coming into the league, and the success Isaiah had being in the league, drafted where he was drafted and so forth, and playing where he was playing, and hard working, whatever, of course. And it also does. They both are from Chicago, so they both have that Detroit type of, approach where it's mentally tough and so forth, and they may be the small guy, whatever, but you would never know it because their heart would triumph over a guy that's like 7 foot. They're gonna come at you. So he kind of reminded me of Isaiah Thomas in that regard, and as well as what was just stated. And where he reminded me of Chauncey Billups, when Chauncey Billups, by the time Chauncey Billups came to the Pistons, he had bounced around so many different times that the flash and Chauncey Billups used to have like hops and jumping out the gym, and he was really an athletic guy, but by the time he got to the Pistons, the game had slowed down. And it was like, of course he had some injuries and so forth, and, but the game had got really, really easy for him to play. He started to master it, pick his spots and how to basically be a general on the floor versus just going off of raw talent, or just off abilities and stuff like that. He learned how to position his opponent and so forth. And I believe that's where Derrick Rose is at his career at this point. He showed me that with the Pistons last year, that at the age that he was, and regardless of the injuries that he went through, that he doesn't have to be athletic Derrick Rose or the MVP Derrick Rose. He can actually be the IQ, smart version of Derrick Rose, where the game slows down. It's like two versions of Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan, the flying through the air Michael Jordan. Then there's the Michael Jordan that you can never beat. The flying through the air Jordan, you can beat him. But the one that mastered how to position his opponent is the one you could not beat. You couldn't beat that Jordan. So anyway, now I say all that to say, if I'm going to start with the Pistons, if I'm going to start my franchise, I got two guys that I can base my blueprint off of, and that's Isaiah Thomas and that's Ben Wallace. In the front court, give me Ben Wallace. In the back court, give me Isaiah Thomas. Killian Hayes, I don't know if he's going to be in the mold of Isaiah Thomas like that. Not just ice in your veins and this, you knocking me down, I get back up, but more so just outwill their opponent. That's what I'm looking for in my point guard or in the backcourt. That's my template from if I was to use the era of the going to work and the bad boys. With the bad boys, you had Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars, and you also had Vinnie Johnson. You wasn't going to outdo them. Joe Dumars was known as a 3-and-D guy who could score and so forth. But you know, I don't know if not too many people knew that he was actually a point guard at McNeese State, and by the but he can shoot. So, but by the Pistons having Isaiah Thomas, they thought that they could get some of the load off of Isaiah Thomas by running the ball, so forth, and play off the ball. And he turned out to be a two guard, and they end up being one of the best backcourts probably ever assembled. So, and Benny Johnson, which is just a cold just scorer, you know, he just really had that mentality. You're not going to stop him from scoring. So that kind of worked out well, you know, with that. And I think Vinny Johnson was there before Joe Dumars was there, but I don't know if he was starting. I'm not sure. He could have been. But with that being said, that formed that trio. And if I'm going to make a backcourt, I'm going to base upon what I saw in the Bad Boys. But if I were to switch it over to the going to work, you had three guys in a stretch run. I'm gonna say the stretch run, but the best run that they had four guys in the backcourt. You had Chauncey, you had Rip, you had Lindsey, you had Mike James. It's not much you was going to be able to do with that, because the bench guys was like they gave Chauncey and Rip the opportunity to rest up by suffocating the backcourt of the opposing team. You know, so that stretch run with those four was good. I almost want to say it's almost equivalent to the trio of the Bad Boys. Now, would I prefer to have the Bad Boys trio? Yeah, well, definitely, yeah. You know, but that four, if Mike James could have stayed here with Lindsey Hunter and with Rip and Rip and Chauncey, we were actually in Detroit. We've been equally talking about the quartet as well as much as the trio, because that when Lindsey and Mike James came in the game, it changes the game. And Max actually those games that they lost against Cleveland and Boston and Miami, if they would have had a Mike James on that team, you know, versus of course they could have said they could have had Carmelo, they could, you know, instead of Darko, and you know, but give me Mike James instead of Carmelo in those situations. I would rather have a guy with Lindsey that said you're not getting across this half court line, and where's a defensive thing, which I think that was the reason why they lost against Miami, Cleveland, and Boston, is because it became down to the point where the Pistons was relying too much on their starting five. And maybe you had I don't think Corliss was there. I don't think. And they had a few bench players like McDyess and Lindsey, but I think those were their mainstays coming off the bench. I think they went like 7 deep, versus when they won the title, they was going like 10 deep. You know, so excuse me. If I'm going to build it, I'm going to build it off, going back to this, I will build it off the Isaiah Thomas blueprint in my backcourt. In my front court, give me Ben Wallace. And I switched that over to the guy that they drafted this year and the free agent that they brought in. You have, I think, Jeremy Grant they brought in. You have, what's his name? And Isaiah Stewart, right? That's my actually future front court, if I were to be honest. Now, my brother told me that I didn't even know this, that Jeremy Grant was playing, I think, some 3 in Denver. I didn't know that. I'm thinking he's like 6'9", 6'10", and he's basically 6'10", the small, power forward position only. But I didn't know he was playing the 3. We were trying to decide like what would be our starting 5, and we both agreed that we wouldn't probably start Killian Hayes unless he came in like Isaiah Thomas did. If he came in like Isaiah Thomas when he was drafted, he came in as a killer. Like, he was arguably like the best player on the team coming in as a rookie. So So if you have him with that heart coming in and the heart of a lion, then I do it. So, but otherwise, Killing Hayes, I will sit him, and Derrick Rose is definitely my guy. And we was undecided about the two guard position, but he went with Svi, and I'm torn because I recently heard some news about Sadiq Bey, and my brother was talking about the second rounder that they picked up that he liked. They actually brought in some interesting pieces that anybody can take that number two spot. And but I think that whoever is going to play the number two spot is going to have to probably be a three and a D and three guy. They're going to have to play defense, and they're going to have to be able to hit the three ball, score the ball. So Josh Jackson could be a candidate. Sadiq Bey could be a candidate. I think his name is Delon Wright. He could be a candidate. The guy that they got in the second round, he could be a candidate. Svi, well, I think he's a shooter less than a defensive guy. So Joe Dumars will be the ideal guy, as the blueprint, versus being Rip Hamilton. Rip Hamilton was okay, but I think his defensive protection came from Ben Wallace and Rasheed Wallace and even Tayshaun back, so forth. Rip Hamilton played D, but he wasn't known for his defense. He's known for his offense. So, but I think the guy that they're going to play the two guard is going to be in the ideal of Joe Dumars. I would love for Derrick Rose to be the starting point guard. Derrick Rose to be the starting point guard. Just give me a guy that's going to play the two that's going to be very, very, very tough. Tough. That not just ice in the veins, but you're not going to outwork him. He's going to always outwork you. Give me that guy as my number two guard. And but actually, I would say that about Rip. Rip, you wasn't going to outwork Rip. Rip was very conditioned. So he was going to run you around. And he actually played a lot of defense doing his offense by running off screens and everything else. That tired you out when it came to you playing offense. He was tiring you out when he was playing, by checking him. So now if I may switch that over, and I'm going to talk about my top five centers of all time, and which is a position that does not really gets its recognition that it deserves because of the high flying or the scoring per se, or how the baskets is being scored. And I once again, I was talking to my brother about it, and I was telling him that as good as the people talk about how Shaq is, I told him, I said, Shaq doesn't even make my top five, of centers of all time. And I want to say Shaq is like, Shaq to me is like, he's not a good ball player. I understand back in the 2000s on up, the NBA is shifted. It went from like being a man's sport to like being for kids, where a lot of the players came in and they came in with the shoe contracts and they already had the guarantee contracts and everything else, and they came in kind of spoiled. So it's kind of hard for me to root for them guys, in the 2000s on up, or I could say the 90s on up. It's kind of hard for me to root for them, not 2000, but the 90s on up. My favorite is interesting that I say that because my favorite player of all time is Penny Hardaway, who came in the 90s. So, but even with that, he was spoiled a little bit, but not as nowhere near as of course Shaq, whatever. But going with my top five, of course I have the greatest of all time, in my opinion, not in centers, but the greatest player of all time is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is my number one. My number two is Hakeem Olajuwon. My number three is Wilt Chamberlain. That's where a lot of people may get it, like, where I don't know about that and so forth. And then I rounded off with Bill Russell and Moses Malone. That's why I'm saying Shaq doesn't even make my top five. He don't make it because I don't see him being better than any one of those players. Now, what a fan or where a person may argue against my selection, they will say like, well, Shaq would do this, but Shaq won't be able to do that. I can't I could in Shaq's career, I could not see him out muscling Moses Malone or outworking Moses Malone. And Moses Malone put me actually Isaiah Stewart put me in the mind of a Moses Malone. Moses Malone was like you're just not going to outwork him. You're just not going to do it. And he could possibly get you a 2020. Moses was great. I love Moses, particularly that run when he was with Philly when they won the title. I believe they won in '83 when they won the title with Doc and all that good stuff. And at the time, my favorite player, I believe, was Andrew Toney. No, it was Dr. J. Dr. J. But I grew towards Andrew Toney, but Dr. J was my guy. But anyway, Moses Malone, if my were to say my starting fives again of my centers, it would be Kareem, Hakeem, Wilt, Bill Russell, then Moses Malone. I don't see Shaq. Shaq was a kid to all those players. I saw Elijah Wan destroy Shaq. Now Shaq is bigger than he is and all that good stuff. And so anybody talking about Shaq was dominant, I saw Akeem destroy Shaq, destroy him. He don't stand a chance against Wilt, and he definitely don't stand a chance against Kareem. If you're gonna try to do that bully ball stuff, it's not gonna work. There's nothing he can do against Kareem. There is nothing he can do against Kareem in that hook. There's nothing. Shaq is a kid compared to those five that I just named. They were men among men, and Shaq was a kid among kids. You know what I'm saying? I can't even say he was a man among boys in his time, because I would see him get frustrated and do certain things that, like a guy that he couldn't mentally muscle, like a guy who he can intimidate, he would call them barbecue chicken. I saw what he was doing against two guys in particular that showed me why I would never put Shaq as my starting five, a greatest of all time starting five. I would never put him as my top five. And when I saw when he went up against Akeem Olajuwon and Ben Wallace, that showed me a case against Shaq. If Shaq can get what he wants, he's going to be that type of player where he's dominant. But if you can't muscle, or if he can't get into your mind, you pretty much own Shaq. So anyway, with that being said, before I continue with my ramble, if I were to pick my Pistons top five, like going into the season, I'm going to say, give me Derrick Rose, or no, I'm going to say going into camp, I don't want to say Blake Griffin's going to start at the power forward, because I don't see him as a defensive guy. So I would like to see him playing. But if they were to, if I were to say this, if they were to allow Blake Griffin to be, regardless of what they're paying him, and regardless of his pedigree that he's coming in that as he's like what he did in his career and so forth and all that, he will actually be my sixth man. And I could rest him up, and I could reserve him. And if that's saying in the plans of keeping him, I will actually, his career could be extended, where he don't have to come in, and he could be dominant as my sixth man guy. And not just a six man come in shooting or something like that, but no, he could just take over. So like if I were to start off with my four, if I went with Jeremy Grant at my four, or I went with Isaiah Stewart at my 4 with Plumlee at the 5. If I did that, or I went with Isaiah Stewart at the 5 and I went with Jeremy Grant at the 4, I could bring in Blake Griffin off the bench now, and he can go to town. I mean, he can reserve his knees, he reserve his body. He don't have to, give all out that much effort, but he will honestly be the most dominant player coming in, and he could have his still get his minutes at that position because whoever's playing the 4 spot, whoever's starting at the 4 spot, they don't necessarily have to get starter minutes. You're just coming in to get things going. So, with that being said, that will be either my 4 or my 5 with Isaiah Stewart and Plumlee at my 5, or Isaiah Stewart is at my 4. And if I were to go, I don't know about Sekou being in my starting lineup. If so, he's had the 3 spot, but it's going to be tough for him because if he comes in not Pistons going to work, bad boys ready, if he's not coming in with that mentality, I'm coming to take your lunch from you, outwork you and everything else, I don't see him being on this team. I see him possibly they would have draft picks and so forth, as well as young players that they actually trade for actually all-star, superstar type talent. They could be in the running for that. And so as much as people are hiring them because they're young and they got talent, I'm looking for the Piston DNA in my development and my young players and so forth. I need that, not this modern day stuff where you're taking pictures and you trying to posterize a person and all that good stuff. I'm looking for like Piston DNA where I'm going to outwork you. I'm going to be mentally tougher than you, and I have maybe some offense or defensive skill or so forth. I'm looking for something like that as my Pistons roster. Anybody that's not filling that spot is either you're reduced to a role player, or not, you're just not on the team. So with that being said, Pistons people, give me Derrick Rose in the backcourt with whoever plays consistent D. I'm going to go with, and I'm looking at Sadiq Bey as my number 2. It's going to be tough because Josh Jackson may come in hungry. He plays D, from my understanding, and he may finally get his act together. Or you may go with the right guy that they brought in, or you may go with Svi as a shooter. But I don't care for offense coming in. I want to suffocate my opponent. I want to outwork my opponent. Scoring the basket can be easy when we play the Pistons basketball, off of defense, hard work, and whatever, turnovers and so forth. I understand the game has changed. It became offensive or more offensively, but defense still, I believe, can dominate this modern day basketball. That's why when you hear the argument of Rasheed Wallace talking about what their 04 Pistons or 4 Pistons would do against Golden State, this is even with the Kevin Durant Golden State, when they were winning, what they would do, he said they would win. And even with Steph Curry being Steph Curry and so forth, and Clay being Clay, and Durant being Durant offensively, they believe that their team, the Pistons team, the going to work crew, that is, that they would outwork their opponent defensively. So all the stuff that they're able to do in this modern day, they wouldn't be able to do. This is the same thing what Jordan was saying with like that I want to say the 96 team. He was saying like there's no way because their team was too defensively sound. With Ron Harper and Jordan in the backcourt, with Scottie Pippen in the front court, that was hard to. And Scottie Pippen and Dennis Rodman, that was too much of a defensive team. And I guess you could throw in a Luke Longley per se, or whoever that you want to play at center, but that was too much of a defensive team. And Jordan was predominantly their scorer. Scottie Pippen was scorer too, but a lot of their score came off of defense. Jordan could get you buckets anytime you need buckets, or just by him just doing what he does. but they offense came predominantly off their defense. So that's why they would say that they could beat the Golden State. And I support their argument. Give me a defensive team that you can't move. You can't get into the head, whatever. We're going to beat you defensively versus beating you offensively. Give me that. And that's where I would try to break my starting five with the Pistons going into the 2021 season. Make my starting five based upon defensively. Give me my best defensive starting five. From if Killian Hayes can play that lockdown defense type deal, he may have the skills of offensively and get teams involved and creative and make plays of being a playmaker and so forth. But I need that dominant defense or that out will mentality. And my brother was giving an argument with that, and he told me that he was born in the States and he went overseas to play ball. And I said, huh. Because I was taking him very lightly at first. I was like, I don't know if he would be Piston DNA and everything else. But when he told me that he went over, I was like, wait a minute. That could be just like surviving. I mean, going from the States to overseas could be just like surviving going through Chicago or going through Detroit type deal. And which I'm backing up with Derrick Rose and Isaiah Thomas per se. They didn't grow with a silver spoon. They had to work at it and everything else, go through the grit of Chicago. And Chicago wasn't nowhere near no pushover. It's just like Detroit wasn't. So to make it out of there, you coming in the league with some toughness. It kind of changed my mind about Killian Hayes, that he may be tough, more tougher than I gave him credit for, in his approach towards the league. I just need him to be willing to outwork his opponent. Whatever that he does, outwork your opponent. I don't care about the flashiness. That he can score the basket or throw a no-look pass, and I need you to outwork your opponent. Because I want the opponent to respect you, and the best way to get your opponent to respect you is when they can't outwork you. You're going to match their effort, and then if not match it, you're going to surpass it. All right, Piston fans, let's keep this moving. I believe the Pistons are going to have a good year, and it's not about a surprise team. They don't have a reason not to. There's really not a team in the East that scares me. And I was asking my brother about who is his top 5 teams, in the East, or top 4 teams. And of course, you got your Bucks, you got your maybe the Pacers or some other teams in Miami, and Toronto, maybe some other teams around there that I don't follow the NBA like I once did. And I asked him, I said, does one team in the East scare you? Like intimidate you, scare you? Like where Milwaukee was destroying the Pistons, for the years that going to the playoffs or whatever. Milwaukee was the dominant team. I said, but does anybody scare you? I said, and he says, no, not really. And he asked me the same question. And I said, no, not at all. Because I like how they're building the team. They're building this team on like toughness. This like toughness. Not just people coming in, they play defense. I believe they're bringing in players that you can't get into their head toughness. Like it's like a combination of the bad boys and the going to work crew. There's no way you were going to beat that team if they was combined. There's no way. I don't care who you have. Michael Jordan with the 96 Bulls. It doesn't matter. You wasn't going to beat those two teams combined because you weren't going to outwork them. So with that being said, catch y'all on the next one.